And while we're talking about the governor, we can't ignore the headlines recently, the controversy surrounding an expected new role for her wife within the governor's office. The timing of that news follows 3 of Kotek's top aides leaving, and it appears to show that the decision to bring Amy Kotek Wilson in with a formal role was not all that popular with everyone. Her role as first spouse is basically an unpaid volunteer, but she does have a paid advisor who will work with her over the next 6 months to establish the office of first spouse. The governor addressed it Wednesday ahead of the Q&A with reporters.
And we want to do this as transparently as possible. One of the things that we inherited, the global we, there has been no guidance from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission on what is appropriate for the role of a first spouse since the first spouse was made a public official. So I supported that legislation when it was put into place, where first spouses are now public officials under the revised statutes. That's why, the first spouses have to submit, their statements of economic interest just like other electeds. But there's been no guidance on what that actually means. And we have been trying to figure that out. And I know that there are questions. So I wanted to let you all know today that we are working on a set of questions that we will submit to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission around the first spouse. In general, like questions that I think a lot of people have. We're working on the questions. We're going to submit those, I believe we're shooting for Friday, to the commission. We'll make those public, what the questions are. The response from the Ethics Commission will also be a public document because they do give opinions, and that's how they do it. So we hope that will provide some clarity for everybody, certainly our office, certainly the public, and answer probably a lot of your questions as well.
And just a few moments later, a reporter pressed the governor on whether or not her wife will actually be involved with public policy.
I think we are trying to figure out what that even means. What does it mean to be involved in policy? Let me give you an example. Because frankly, any conversation you have as a governor is somewhat policy related. So here's a situation that we're visiting all 9 tribes this year as a sovereign nation-to-nation initiative to government relations with our tribes. So we were visiting with the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians last week. First Lady, appropriately, was on the trip with me, like she was in many of the One Oregon listening tour visits. I think it's important to show the respect to show up with your family when you do these types of visits. We had a fantastic conversation about behavioral health and what the Siletz are doing to deal with the issue of fentanyl in their community and some of the success they're having. So we had a great conversation. She was sitting in the room listening to the conversation. But at the end of the day, I make all the policy decisions. I was elected, I'm the governor, the buck stops with me. Policy decisions and choices are mine and mine alone. When you travel to National Governors Association meetings and you see what other first spouses are doing, we just haven't had that history in the state. We've had some active first spouses over decades. But this is the first time, going back to my opening comments, where we need to understand what it means to be a public official today under the statute for a first spouse. And for me, it's always been not about the First Lady, but about the first spouse, of which there is one now. What should that role look like? We are seeking guidance from the Ethics Commission because we need some guidance, because people have lots of questions. We are figuring out, I think the public's trying to understand it, and hopefully we'll get strong guidance from the Ethics Commission.
All right, well, we'll be keeping an eye out for those questions as well as the Ethics Commission opinion whenever that document is made available. The governor was in front of reporters not to address this controversy, but for a ceremonial bill signing. These are classic dog and pony shows held across the country at the state and federal level. Yesterday's signing celebrated the campaign finance reform bill that surprised many of us during the short session. Now, you might think the campaign finance is an exciting topic, or you might not, but you should, because it pays for all those TV ads and mailers that you get every election cycle. Up until now, been pretty wide open in Oregon with really no limits, and it's going to stay that way until the law kicks in 2027. The biggest change, individuals and corporations will be restricted to giving just $3,300 per election. So, Nike founder Phil Knight, you will not be able to directly pour millions into candidates like you did during the last governor's race. We dove into the nitty-gritty details of that bill back on March 6th. You can find that on the KGW YouTube channel right now. But let's get back to the bill signing ceremony. There are lots of pictures and video to celebrate the moment, and we've already said, hey, they should be proud. Campaign finance reform is a big deal. It was a big problem that nobody could get movement on for years, and nobody expected it this year, but these folks did get it done, so good for you. Now, just so you know, governors sign lots and lots of bills. They create events out of the ones they really like or believe are going to help them politically, and I mean, you know, sometimes that's all wrapped into the same bill. But then they bury the ones that they don't like, but they still know they have to sign into law, kind of like they're holding their noses to do it. Over the years, lots of governors have had big celebrations for big bills. Here's Kate Brown in 2019 signing a statewide rent control bill, making it law. And here's Governor Brown again, this time back in 2017, signing the last big transportation bill, which, by the way, contained tolling. But back then, the whole package was quite popular. And there's lots of other examples, but you get the idea. It's a party when the governor signs something they like, something momentous for the state. So then we were thinking about other bills that are signed into law recently, and there's one that's just kind of right on the edge of my mind, something that has to do with a big problem that we've been dealing with, something about open-air drug markets or people using drugs on the sidewalks. What was that? Yes. Yes, I remember it now. I do remember it. It's House Bill 4002. It recriminalized drugs in Oregon. It ended the experiment with legal drugs in our state. It gutted Measure 110. Oh, I'm so glad I remember that for you. That was a huge deal. So let's see the big celebration on that one.
No video.
That's the director. Is that right? Yeah. There's no video. Oh, well, all right, we can roll with that. Let's at least see the pictures and some of the governor's great quotes about the will of the people being followed and that sort of thing.
No pictures.
There's no pictures either. There's none of that. None. No clapping people, smiling, confetti. No handshakes. Oh boy. Well, listen, folks, there's a reason for that, and here's my opinion on this. I guess it is true what they say about experiments. When they go well, everyone claims they had a role and celebrates. When they go bad, they're shut down, quietly, in the dark, with no fanfare. A lot of Democrats and non-affiliated progressives are mad that the bill to recriminalize drugs passed. They're mad the legalized drug experiment called Measure 110 is over in Oregon. And a lot of those people probably supported Governor Kotek right up until the moment that she signed the bill that killed Measure 110. So in my opinion, that's why it was killed quietly. No point in fanning the flames of anger with those supporters. It's not an accident that we didn't see any video or pictures. And yes, by the way, we did ask the governor's office, and they told us there's no photos, there's no videos of that moment. How about that? You know what? Sometimes you can learn a bunch from noticing what you don't see in politics.